When you're ready.
Effects of environment on mental health. Human life depends on the proper quality and quantity of resources from the surrounding physical environment, like the land, water, air, plants and animals, and even artificial structures like buildings. It's not just human physical health that depends on this, but also mental health and one's well-being. The impacts of physical habitat on human biological health have been well studied. For example, high levels of ultraviolet radiation leads to skin cancer, and air contamination leads to lung cancer. Physical environment not only impacts biological health, but even more directly impacts mental health, and the level of one's resilience determines the extent of that impact. But mental health is not just about mental illness. It's about how people think and feel about themselves and their well-being. One's physical environment, particularly urban and rural environments, incarceration, the built environment, climate and climate change, may have an even more significant role in mental health than one's genetics or biological makeup. Urban and rural habitats have very different impacts on mental health. In a rural environment, the risk of suicide is 2 times higher. The physical environment is a significant reason for this high suicide rate. Rural areas are more geographically spread out, so there is less access to mental health care. The physical environment is less populated with less doctors or less therapists. There's more poverty in rural areas with inadequate housing, sanitation conditions, and fewer schools. In a famous nearly century-old photograph, Dorothy Lang depicted the mental despair due to the conditions of poverty suffered by a rural migrant mother in the 1936 photo, Migrant Mother. 2/3 of the world's population is expected to live in urban areas by 2050. With an urban environment, there is more competition for resources. Urban environments cause increased rates of anxiety and depression due to factors of overcrowding, noise and air pollution, water contamination, and lack of green space. Schizophrenia rates are also higher. The lack of green space diminishes human mental health. And since the 19th century, cities have recognized this and have worked to include parks and green space in urban areas, knowing the beneficial effects it has on human mental health. Humans spend most of their time indoors, and the artificial environment built around them has significant impacts on their mental health. One example is indoor temperatures. A large percentage of the low-income population lives below the minimum acceptable indoor temperatures, which can negatively impact someone's health. Besides issues like pneumonia, low indoor temperatures have also been linked to anxiety and depression. Light is another environmental factor impacting mental health. Inadequate exposure to daylight in buildings increases the probability of depression by 60%. Schools with optimal lighting have been proven to have higher test scores, reduced absences, and better health overall. Pollution is another component of the built environment impacting mental health. Cleaning and combustion products cause cognitive defects over time and in young children. Outdoor air pollution can reach indoors, especially in poor neighborhoods and in urban areas. There is an increased risk of depression and suicide due to air pollution from low-grade inflammation in areas of the brain that is responsible for mood. Noise pollution can also be a factor due to poor housing structures. Besides causing stress, anxiety, and sleep disturbances, noise pollution is well known to cause hearing loss, which can also negatively impact one's mental health. The suicide rate of prisoners is 6 times the general population. In this physical environment, prisoners are isolated, lack mental stimulation, face overcrowding and enforced solitude, and lack privacy. These factors all contributed to the worsening of mental illness. In one study, it was found that 90% of prisoners suffered from mental illness, addiction, or a behavioral personality disorder. Seasonal affective disorder is a well-known mental health disorder, but climate and climate change also have significant impacts on mental health. The impacts of extreme weather events such as hurricanes, droughts, tornadoes can cause high-risk coping mechanisms like substance abuse and are also linked to depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. Extreme weather events are also implicated on aggressive behavior, like domestic violence or even child abuse. And according to the Climate Psychiatric Alliance, air pollution exposure has been linked to autism, ADHD, disruptive behavior disorder, anxiety, and depression. Resilience is necessary to adapt to these physical environments. Resilience is the process of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences through behavioral or emotional flexibility. It is a necessary defense mechanism to help humans survive stressful situations. Although stress and trauma are known to provoke mental illness disorders, most people experiencing a significant stressor do not develop these illnesses. They have more resilience. Looking again at Migrant Mother, despite the despair and poverty in the photo, Florence Thompson symbolizes determination and resilience. Similarly, in A Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela, he explains his absolute refusal in giving up his dignity in prison and refused to believe that he would never be set free. Not only did this resilience get him out of prison, but it later made him president of South Africa. Environmental factors impact mental health. Ways to improve these factors include supporting rural areas with increased access to medical care and education, and in urban areas, increasing green space, instituting noise ordinances, making laws to improve air quality, and restructuring cities to have inclusivity. We can also design buildings with improved lighting, temperatures, and air quality.
Colin Strauss, please report to the main office. Colin Strauss, please report to the main office. Thank you.
We can also work to improve mental health care in prisons and increase laws dealing with climate change. Resiliency must be focused on in communities in order to improve mental health outcomes. As Nelson Mandela said, "Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again."
Couple of questions. Did your research go in a different direction than you originally expected?
Yes, I initially wanted to focus on all elements of human adaptation due to environmental changes, both biological and emotional, but also the physical environment and the social one. Much of the biological impacts are already well known, like the sun causes skin cancer and air contamination causes lung cancer. So investigating mental health was more of a challenge, and I found more interest in it, so it would be easier to research.
Okay, thank you. What additional questions emerged from your research?
Additional questions I have for my research include why some people are more resilient than others. Are people born with a resilience trait, or is something developed over time? And what happens in the brain to make someone more impacted by their environment for mental health issues? Answering these questions are the basis for figuring out how to help individuals and communities improve their mental health outcomes.
All right.